with me. And I want you to do me a favor. Let's take a few minutes and forward this to some of your friends and your Instagram followers and your Instagram or your Facebook friends. Let them know that we are rocking and rolling and we're live right now. I'd love to be able to talk to them about our overtime experience. And this is overtime, by the way. Welcome to overtime. I hope you guys had a fantastic and a wonderful Thanksgiving. In fact, why don't you type in and tell me what was blessed about your Thanksgiving? Tell me what you had so much gratitude about. So since Thanksgiving is about gratitude, what was your gratitude moment? What were you grateful to God to have during Thanksgiving season? For me, I'm gonna go with just having family, just having the family around. Y'all know COVID-19 has been crazy, and it has made this one crazy year. And for me, spending this time with my family it's been great. It really has been great, and it's been great because I don't just love my wife. I like her. She's cool people to be around, and we have great conversations. We entertain ourselves a lot, and of course, raising the babies is its own thing as well. But I'm grateful. So what were you grateful for this Thanksgiving season and this Thanksgiving time? When y'all went around the table and everybody got a chance to say what they were thankful for, what did you say? I want to pop that in. That's pretty good. And while you guys are writing that, let's go ahead and get started and welcome you guys to Overtime. This is the time where we share a tad bit about the post-service conversation. And today, this morning, I taught about due seasons, and I talked about what the Bible calls the fullness of time. And it's out of the book of Galatians, where the Bible says that in the fullness of time, God sent forth his son, Jesus Christ. And I spent some time talking about what it means to come into the fullness of time, to come full term, to be at the moment of execution. That's what it means to be in full time. It just means the fullness of time is just that right season when it's got to happen or it's going to happen. So I want to talk just a tad bit about that, because one of the things I didn't get to talk about that I want to talk about is the process of getting to your due season or getting to the fullness of time. I used as an example when we had our babies about a week ago today. It's going to be like December 8th is when our twins were born. And a year ago, when we found out that my wife was pregnant, 8 months ago, we found out my wife was pregnant. I was so high off of anticipation that literally it seemed like every week I was looking at her belly to see if I could see a belly bump. Every week it was like, is there a belly bump? Around week 3, it's like, I see it. She's like, boy, you don't see no belly bump. Like nobody's showing a belly bump after 2-3 weeks. And she started showing probably around week 10-ish, 11-ish, 12-ish, somewhere in that space. It started to be really defined. And as we went on, about 8 months later, 7.5 months later, rather, we went to a doctor's checkup because she was having some contractions, and we didn't know if they were contractions or if the babies were just kicking hard. So we went into the doctor, let them take a look. And when the doctors finished the tests that they do, they showed that she was having contractions and that these were not the babies kicking, but in fact, it was the babies saying that they're ready to come out. And we were 8 months in, and the doctor came in the room and she said to us, it's due time. It's time to have these babies. Instead of sending you back home, they're ready to come. And we were not ready for that moment. If we rewound the tape about 2 weeks before, we knew that we were entering our 8th month. We knew that we were a month or so, maybe 2 months away. So we started to pack bags, and we had like little neat things that we were going to set by the doors so that when the time came, I could just grab the bags. We could head over to the hospital and have our twins. And she started to have these contractions, and we didn't know what they were. So we went to the doctor because we thought that the baby was, well, one, she was just dealing with it for about a month because she just thought that they were the baby's kicking. And we went in for a routine checkup, and the doctors came in and was like, hey, you know you're having a contraction. And she's like, no, the babies are kicking. They were like, no, this is a contraction. And she's like, I have these all the time. And they kept her in the hospital for about a week when they realized that she was having them all the time because it was too early for her to be experiencing contractions. They got about another month down the line when this second time came where she felt like, hey, let's go in and have to the doctor. I'm not feeling good. The babies are kicking, or I'm having more contractions. And we took her in, and we were at the 8th month mark when the doctor came in the room, and she said, hey, it's time. She was like, let's just do it. It's due time. And we weren't ready for it because we had prepared ourselves for a different season in our own head. We had prepared ourselves for a different time that this was going to happen. We had a scheduled C-section in our thinking. It was on the calendar. It was marked for the date that this was going to go down. And what do you do with life when life doesn't function on schedule? How do you handle life when you thought you'd be married with children by 26, and here you are at 38, single, no children, uncertain if it's ever going to happen? What happens when life is not operating according to schedule? You saw yourself in your 3rd promotion by now, and it just hasn't happened. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened. It missed your time. How do you handle when life is off schedule? And for most of us, when we think about life being off schedule, we think about it as being late, as it not happening soon enough. Well, what happens when it happens before you expected it? Like for us, we had the baby set off at 9.5 months, and here we are a month ahead of time. It's happening before we expected it to happen. So I have a friend who lost her grandmother at 69 years old. And her grandmother was kind of the matriarch of the household, and her mother had already passed on, and the grandmother was somewhat the mother figure for all of the children. And she was otherwise healthy, and she had a stroke, and she died. And all of a sudden, this woman that they were anticipating may have another 20 years to live, all of a sudden everybody's role was accelerated because her death was ahead of time. They had a thought process about when it might happen. She was supposed to die old. She was supposed to die 79, 89. That's what she was supposed to do, not 69. She was supposed to at least make the promise. But her due time, her due season, her fullness of time for them accelerating who they were going to be in the family, it happened sooner than they expected. It's one thing to be off schedule and things to happen late. It's another thing for things to happen early. And the irony for us is that the pregnancy, and my wife went into labor early, and whilst many of us are excited about moving into due season ahead of schedule, you got to remember the story of my wife and I, because both of our children were born not breathing. Both of them were born premature. They spent the first 16, 17 days of their life in the NICU, which is the baby's ICU. They spent the first 3 days on an ice incubator, hoping to calm their brains down because they were uncertain if they had brain damage or not. Because this is the wisdom of God. Sometimes things come in our lives late because when they come early, either you are not prepared for it or it is not prepared for the world it's being birthed in. And our children were born early, and like I'm much better with late things than I am with things that catch me by surprise or that are too early. And our children, them being in our lives that soon was a complication on multiple levels. And we talked today about dealing with due seasons, and not just seasons that are late, but when the fullness of time, when God says it's time, and when it's not on your schedule, and when it comes into the earth and it's not prepared and it's not ready. Like, what do you do with a dream that has to be activated right now? What do you do with the vision where God says, I'm not waiting for you to be 50 to do this. It's got to happen right now. What do you do with the message or prophetic utterance or word for the season when you had it on your schedule that, yeah, man, I'm going to run for office when I'm 55, and God says, nope, I want you to move now at 45. Like, what happens? How does that strike? And the reason why I'm saying this is because I've been feeling and I've been thinking that there are going to be a lot of things birthed and never get an opportunity to go to full term just because of the world we're living in. I've been getting this feeling that some of you guys that are watching online, that are watching me right now, God is going to ask you to release things before you are ready to release them, before you are economically prepared to release them, before you have the right team. And you've got to function with the premature dream. You've got to deal with the dream or vision that is not yet what you're hoping it to be. See, one of the reasons why I could deal with overdone things versus things that are done early, because I don't like to start. Like, I get excited about starting stuff just like anybody else. So I'm not saying that I'm not excited about starting. But I also realize that when you start stuff, I'm a little bit impatient because I want it to be the way I see it, not the way that it starts. I want to see it at the end. In my head, when I get ready to start something, I'm already on to the next project because by the time it gets started, my visionary mindset sees it bigger and more profound and more gigantic than what's actually in my possession. So I'm not a big fan of starting because I'm not a big fan of what's in my possession. I know that it has to develop, and I'll be happier when it gets to what I saw it. And when we had our babies, this was not the way we planned on starting. It just wasn't. It wasn't the way I planned on it starting. The ICU was not the way I planned on it starting. Babies not breathing was not the way. That was not in the plan. The plan was to have the babies, 2 days later, take my children and my wife home, and we figure out life. And in the prematurity, we realized that God had prepared us for this moment. I remember sitting, it was around the time about the 5th day when they let us start to hold the children. And I remember thinking to myself that, boy, it's been 3 days, 4 days since you had a chance to touch your children and hold your babies. We didn't get to hold them until about the 4th day. We didn't get a chance to hold them. And while I'm holding them, I'm thinking, man, I've never had children, and I didn't panic. I wasn't angry at anyone. My wife was cool as a cucumber through the process. We had a quiet faith that everything was going to be all right, even though it wasn't all right. We didn't like the beginning, but what we did realize is that we actually were built for the moment. Because there were parents that were running through the NICU that were in pandemonium, that had family members that could not spend moments with their children without wailing and crying and just being hysterics over the circumstance and the situation. And I realized, I'm sitting back thinking to myself, like, man, that God, like, even though this was off schedule for us, you prepared us for this moment. You had us ready for this moment. And then when you start to think about all the stuff in your yesterday that could have prepared you for this moment, all the letdowns, all the heartbreaks, all the frustration, all the difficult moments, that maybe God was building something in me from years past and in my wife from years past to help us deal with the moment when he says that I'm moving you into your due season, whether you're ready or not, because heaven is ready, because the season is ready, because the babies are ready. Everything in this world was ready except for me and my wife. And God said, but I prepared you for this. And of course, like they're amazing now. And we got the miracle reports, no brain damage, no side effects. They're doing just fine. They're ripping and running and doing all that stuff. If you follow me on social media, you see I post them all the time. And they are very normal and beautiful and celebrating their first birthday. But I'm wondering if I can get you guys to prepare your hearts for God to bless you faster than you expected. I want you to put this in your heart that it is possible for God to bring you into a due season ahead of schedule. And what is your heart and what is our mind and what is the position and disposition do I have to take now to prepare myself for a premature blessing? For a blessing that maybe I'm not totally prepared for a blessing, watch this, that when it gets here, it may not be what I envisioned it being, but it's my blessing nonetheless. And now I've got the tremendous task of having faith and of molding and of being a part of making this what God always saw it and what I always saw it would be. So today's overtime is not even so much about the message as much as it's about dealing with your due season, dealing with the fullness of time when God kind of does it off your schedule. And I just feel like there are about to be some people blessed off a schedule, healed off a schedule, put in positions off a schedule, given opportunities out of your schedule. You thought it would take you 3 years. God is saying it's going to happen before the end of 2020. You thought it was going to happen in 2021. God said 2025. God is saying that now I'm going to bring it to pass in 2021 because when he gets ready is when it gets birthed. When God gets ready, the baby comes because he is the giver of life. And when he says it's time for life, then your dream comes alive. Your dream is birthed in the earth. So I want you just to be encouraged by that. I want you to be prepared for whatever God might do. So get yourself in position to execute. Get yourself in position that, publishers might be ready before your book is ready. You just got to get yourself in position. You might think, hey, man, I'm going to submit this thing in January. And what if they call you in 2 weeks and say, hey, we're ready for the next volume of your enterprise? Are you ready for it? Are you prepared? This has been an uncommon year. We've had unpredictable and uncommon seasons. And they've still been God called and God sent. And I just sense that there is a blessing on the way. There are blessings on the way that are off schedule, that are not going to meet the timetable that you set up, that are not going to meet the criteria that you put in place. So be prepared to receive the blessing of God, even if it doesn't start the way you had anticipated it. If it comes early, than you anticipated. It's one thing for it to come late, because a heart deferred makes the heart sick, or promise deferred, rather, makes the heart sick. I get that. That's the Bible. I'm not talking about waiting for that kind. I'm saying that what happens if it happens now? Are you ready? What happens if God says, go? Are you ready? What happens if God says, now is the season for you to rise up and be the voice of your family, the voice of your community, the voice of a people? Are you ready? Are you ready? So get ready. Get ready. That's my